Hi book friends, welcome back to my channel. I am a Jen who reads, and this is my September reading wrap up. September was a phenomenal reading month for me. My whole entire TBR, I only had 2 books and 1 audiobook that I didn't get to. I had planned to listen to the 5th book in the Mortal Instruments series on audio, but I got sucked into Bookish podcasts. Specifically this one right here, which I've talked about, I think, in another video. This is Book Reviews Kill, so I'm just catching up, listening to all of the book reviews of books that I've read and just enjoying getting to know the hosts of that podcast. And I've also been watching a lot of Booktube as well. So for that reason, I did not listen to anything on audio in the month of September. The other books that I did not get to were That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Human by Kimberly Lemming and Apprentice to the Villain, which is the sequel to my favorite book of 2023. And I'm very surprised that I didn't get to this, but there's a reason I didn't get to them, and I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. So I'm going to just go in order of the books as I read them, starting with the beginning of September, A Novel Love Story. I read this for a book club with Books and Heather. I'm part of her Patreon, and so I had to read this before September 10th because that was when the live show happened. I've read 2 other books by Ashley Poston. I have read The 7-Year Slip and The Dead Romantics, and I loved both of them, and this was no exception. I loved A Novel Love Story. I gave it a 4 stars. This is about a woman who is driving and she gets stuck in the rain and her car breaks down. I think she almost hits somebody, and she finds out that she's actually stuck in the fictional town of her favorite book series. That's all I'm going to say about it because there's a lot more that goes on with that, but I think that that's a really good hook to get you interested if you are thinking that you might want to read this book. I did give it a 4 stars because even though I loved the book, I loved the setting, I loved the characters, I did not love the relationship between the 2 main characters. The whole relationship that this book is set around, the whole romance, I just didn't feel like it was believable. I didn't feel like it was powerful. I just kind of felt like it was ho-hum. There was actually a point in the book where I thought maybe this book was going to end up a little bit different than your typical romance books, and I wasn't sad about it. Another reason I loved this book is because it reminded me of the TV show Virgin River, which I absolutely love that TV show, but every single time that I watch it, all I can think about is how much I want to be there, how much I want to be in a chair sitting next to that river drinking coffee. And so to read a book about a woman who is in the town of her favorite book series is just magical. And I really love it, and I really think that you should give it a try as well. After that, I picked up a book that I've had on my TBR for a little while. This is the art copy of The Women by Kristen Hanna. All of my favorite historical fictions are by Kristen Hanna. I don't read them very often, but when I do pick them up, they're very powerful, they're very emotional, and this was no exception. This is about a woman who goes to Vietnam as a nurse, and all of the crap that she encounters over there with some romance sprinkled in, and then also the ordeals that she has to go through when she comes home. I learned a lot about this time period. I learned a lot about the Vietnam War. I actually found myself, I would be reading and I would stop and put it down and pick up Google and just kind of search for pictures of some of the places that they were talking about so I could get a better picture of it in my head. One thing I really liked about this book was just when I started to get tired of a setting or a storyline, something new would be introduced. So I feel like the entire time that I was reading this book, there was something new and fresh for me to read and pick up on. I gave this a 5 stars. After that, I picked up Cant Spell Treason without T. I had this one on my Kindle for a really long time, and then I ended up putting it on the back burner because I wanted to wait until the physical copy came out. I just love the color of these sprayed edges, and I am so glad that I finally picked this up and read it. If you like Legends and Lattes, you will love this book. If you did not like Legends and Lattes because maybe it was just a little too mild, a little too sweet, a little too soft for you, I still think that you would like this book because even though this is a cozy fantasy, there are some higher stake elements that are involved. It's not only about opening up a tea shop. There is the cutest sapphic romance in here, and there is also a griffin who I absolutely love. And there's a storyline that continues with one of the main characters and this griffin, and it brought me to tears. It made this book even that much more enjoyable. I gave this a 4 stars. And this is where I ran into a problem. I had pretty much all cozy fantasy on my TBR for September. And at this point in the month, I went back to my TBR shelf to pick up the next book. And the only books that I had left were cozy books. And I feel like I sort of cozied myself out, if that makes sense. Once I was looking at the TBR and trying to pick my next book, all I wanted to read was something with some meat, something with some high stakes. I think this is the reason why I don't read books in a series back to back, because I very easily get burnt out on a story, get burnt out on a genre. So I have to jump around and bounce around, which doesn't help me getting through series quickly, but that's a whole other can of worms. So instead of picking up a book on my TBR that I had planned to read, I actually picked up a book that a parent of one of my students brought in for me, and she recommended it, and I had seen it all over Booktube. So I picked up The God of the Woods. This is a mystery book. I think that this is actually marketed as a thriller, and I don't think that it's a thriller. Basically, this family, they have a lot of money, like a lot of money. And they also own a camp where rich people send their children to learn survival skills and just sort of get out of their hair for the summer. And this family had a son who went missing when he was 8 years old. Fast forward like 13 years later, their 13-year-old daughter also goes missing at this camp. And so it spans the 50s, 60s, and 70s, which I really liked the time jumps back and forth. As we're trying to figure out what happened to their daughter, and we're also learning more clues about things that happened to their son. I think that this book did a really good job of introducing a character and making you feel one way about them, and then sprinkling in little nuggets of information that make you think that maybe your first understanding of them was incorrect. So I feel like the characters in this book fluctuate up and down, and that was really exciting. It was a really good read. It really kept my attention. The chapters were short. They were also broken up into chunks within the chapter. But then the ending of this book was just meh. I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars. I would recommend this book to somebody who enjoys mystery thrillers, but I would also be sure to tell them that I thought that the ending was just okay. The cover of this book is really interesting though, because there is this pink paint drip, and you do find out what that paint drip is about the further that you read on, and it's actually very interesting. My biggest complaint with this though is that there are 2 things that happen that are very important to the plot that are never explained, never fleshed out. They're just left hanging there. And I thought maybe as I was reading it, I just missed it. So I went in like a little rabbit hole on Reddit, and apparently I was right. It does not get explained, and I'm not the only one that drives crazy. So overall, I'm glad that I read this book. I would recommend it, but it's definitely not a favorite. And the last book I read in September was a 5 stars all the way across the board. It's the second book in the Thursday Murder Club. This is The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. I read the Thursday Murder Club last month, and this is the second book, and I gave the first book a 5 stars. I gave this book a 5 stars. The mystery that we're trying to solve, that we're following these people in the first book, is pretty low key. It's pretty low stakes. It's all happening pretty locally. This book, the stakes are much higher. Also, my favorite character in this book, Elizabeth. In the first book, I knew that there was some stuff in her background that I really wanted to know about. I was really interested in finding out. And we do get a little bit more tidbits of what Elizabeth was like in her younger years in this book. This book is also a lot funnier than the first book. One of the characters, Joyce, makes an Instagram account, and I looked it up, and it is actually a legit Instagram account where you can look at the pictures that she talks about posting in this book. So I think that that's really interesting. Also, the whole story behind her name, her handle on Instagram, it cracked me up. It is so funny. I would say that my only negative to say about this book is that I am so in love with the characters, but they're not getting any younger, and I still have 2 more books left, and one of the characters went a little downhill in this book, and it makes me worried. I feel like the next book, or maybe even the book after that, is going to be pretty emotional, and I'm not really looking forward to that. If you're interested in my rating system, here is a graphic. You can also find it over on my Instagram. All of my links to my socials are posted in the description. Unfortunately, these 2 are going back on my TBR shelf. I would love to know your favorite read of September in the comments below. Like always, I appreciate your likes, comments, and subscribes. And until the next video, happy reading.